because the dreaming exercise that we're going to do is around looking at and accepting that people do need to have something to look forward to and to have hope for. We all need that, every one of us. And I think that was an excellent point as well, that actually when people around us lose hope, it's almost like a place where we shut up shop and go home, because actually that's the cut-off point, isn't it? It's a situation that's got no go in it. Hope gives us a place to go towards. And one of the things that strikes me out of all of the dreaming stuff that's been done over the years, the idea of using dreams and hopes and aspirations to think about steps that people can take to make changes in life. There's been an awful lot of backlash and criticism around the raising of false hope. It's a good point. Is it good to be raising false hope in people? What, in actual fact, is false hope? It's a very easy get-out clause as well, isn't it? We don't want to be too bothered about having things to be doing with people, or having things to think about that perhaps aren't more natural to us, aren't things we've learned to do yet. It's easy to say, well, that's just raising false hope for people. One of the very interesting things out of that is that the people who that's most applied to, people themselves who've been using dreaming as a way of thinking about mapping out different kinds of futures and what kind of support would help, are people themselves who've said you can't raise false hope because it's already there. And even for people who seem very, very distant and disenfranchised, there's some nugget of hope that always sits in there, but it might just be very difficult to actually find it. But it's the knockback from having had hope that hasn't been supported that causes people to distance themselves and withdraw a little bit. And a good friend of mine, a woman who at the age of 18 had a brain tumour and became a person who was in need of 24-hour full support as a person with quadriplegia, and who also to the brain tumour became blind. It's somebody who talks very eloquently about raising false hope. She says you can't actually do that, because if you help people to have hope, whatever journey they take towards that they've hoped for will be a learning curve, will be something that brings on different experiences. And she talks about, so what if in your, in your searching for the things that you want in life, you fall into deep caverns. She says what you'll find there will always be some jewels along the way. There'll be rubies and diamonds and rocks and things that you can discover along the way. So what if you bump into tall pillars that seem to get in your way? There will be a learning curve along that way. There will be something that comes out of that. She likens that to bumping into trees that have growth and new life from them. I mean, that's quite a fancy way of describing something that for somebody who herself has had many people say, oh, we don't want to go raising false hope for her. That's something that she couldn't possibly be doing that. She couldn't possibly be doing the other, because she's somebody who needs full attendance support constantly. She's gone on to develop her own life. She moved out of the elderly person's home that she was living in as a young 20-ish-year-old person, because that was the only place that could give her full nursing care. And she went to live in her own tenancy with a friend, and then moved on to live with another couple who were friends in her. The idea came out of the circles of support idea and concept. And she's developed a cooperative. She lives in a small housing cooperative where other people, not people with support needs necessarily, live, but they are people who are her neighbours, and that cooperative has a kind of agenda in terms of being neighbours. And she travels the world and talks to people about her experiences. And she has full direct payments and she trains all of her support staff in ways to support them. And she's trained to become a counsellor, a spiritual counsellor along the way. She's got a degree because she was studying really, really at the time. She did that out of having people around her who encouraged her to believe that there were things to be done. Because at the original point of time, she was living as a very dependent person in a nursing home, full-time nursing care with elderly people, and was losing hope fast. So hope is a really important factor, and we shouldn't really ever dismiss something as false hope, because we don't know what it's going to bring. But we need to be able to hear the messages from people. That's what MAP and PATH, another of the personal centre factors that I'll introduce you to, have in them. they have this idea that people have a future to go towards. Personal futures planning, which you have information for, is also has a concept that there is a future that people may want to work towards. I'll just skip over that a minute because I'll just want to take you to the path one. You see, in path, the idea that people will have a dream, a vision, starts the whole process off. It kick-starts. It's very action-based planning tool. And that's what I really want to do now, is to focus in on what does it feel like to actually have people ask you about dreams? And how do you actually help and encourage people to have a dream when they're so bogged down with the reality of day-to-day life, which actually may not feel that good at the moment anyway? So one of the things that we do is we kick-start person-centered planning processes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
When you look
I
at
just
this,
don't want to go back to path.
no, one thing I'm thinking about is the, you know, the circle you did, and we're talking about how the family and the close relationships people have to be included in and whatever. How do we support those families or those close relationships? Do we support those families when, I'm sure all of us have experienced at some time where you're working with an individual, but maybe their family or the people closest to them say, you know, what you're doing is damaging. And I think one of the things was maybe about that, where you might get somebody saying, you know, well, you keep talking to them about their dreams, and you're just making them more depressed. And I'm the person at home that has to pick up the pieces when my son, daughter, partner, whatever.
Yes, if you don't. So, yes, that takes.
Am I making sense?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it takes us back to that very early discussion we had this morning around.
It's too painful for you to be doing that. They're going to get worse. Or...
Yeah, and we have to be prepared for the fact that what we hear. We will know enough about people to hazard a guess that once we start to uncover what it is that they want, it'll be something that we're going to find difficult to respond to. Because invariably, that's why people get trapped, isn't it? It's because we haven't been able to find a response that has been helpful or has proved helpful. So we know that there's going to be stuff that we're going to find tough to hear. And we have to be, all of us who are in there with a person, and the person themselves, have to be able to recognise that this is going to be a tough journey. And that sometimes there are going to be things that seem way, way, way out there, as almost like impossible things.
What I'm asking is, if there are those people who, how do we bring
them in?
Them along?
Right.
You know, we're kind of, at that point, we're the converted, if you like.
Yes.
So I agree with what you're saying there. It's when you've got a partner or, I don't know, a residential worker or whoever that, how do you bring them along with you when they're...
I would use PATH. I would use PATH as my kick-off, because PATH's a very here and now, how I talk to you. Go. Stay. I'm in problems, right? These mine keep flicking through, they don't get stuck. I would use PATH on that score, as long as it's okay with the person, and also as long as I checked out with the person that they definitely want those people to be on board with them. Because sometimes people can do this stuff without that influence as well. It does depend on what the person wants. The relationships that people have in their lives, however, are usually fairly important enough for them to want to have them on board and be supportive with whatever the person is thinking about aiming for in life. So, in thinking about a tool, a person-centered planning tool that could kick off, that would help people to become involved, I would use PATH because it's very here and now. You can do it as an individual, or you can do it as a small group. You can do it as a big group with, you know, whole organisations use PATH now to try and map out their kind of steps and to bring people on in terms of ownership. And what gets written, what gets recorded in the PATH is about the person, what they want in life, and also brings on board the other people. So you bring them round and you invite them to share in dreaming, and then looking at how you move towards things that to do with that dream. So it's very action-based, very here and now, and if you've got a couple of good facilitators in there who can actually make the group work well, so you get one person who's doing the process and one person who's recording, it actually enables them to start having conversations, which may include looking at that quite difficult stuff of, look, this feels like it's raising false hope, and using the PATH tool to say, okay, it seems way out, but there are things that can happen that are positive and possible. We move from a dream to a next stage of thinking, which is, okay, so thinking about the elements of that dream, what do you see in a time frame like a year is positive or possible? So we invite people to bring out of the dream and move out of what's unrealistic, if you like, because that's what dreaming is. We can't say that dreams could be achieved because we don't know. Sometimes they do come true, you know. Sometimes people do win the lottery. More often than not, they don't. So we have to look at, well, what is it telling us about the person that can be moved into the positive and possible? So we invite the people who are perhaps around them to actually think about, but there will be some things that can be worked on, which are going to be about the dream stuff, about the rhythms and the routines and the patterns and the drives and motivations of that person that can be worked on. But we will help you to decide that together with the person. So there's something to move to, which is based on what the person actually wants, and which also invites other people to see that it's possible. So because where you've kind of locked horns, you start to open it up a little bit, and it's through the conversation that the path invites you to have. And it is tough stuff, you know, no two ways about it. It is tough stuff. And as a facilitator of the path, you have to really work hard at making sure that everything that gets recorded is only about what the person really wants recorded. Otherwise, you start getting other people's dreams for people recorded. So you're making people have a conversation about stuff that perhaps hasn't, you know, it hasn't been tackled, and yet it still focuses in on the individual themselves and what they want. I mean, it doesn't have to say huge amounts. It doesn't have to be full. It just has to get to grips with whatever it is that's important for the person. What I'd like you to do is to, because I know it's after lunch, and you don't want to sit there too long, do you? I'd like you to just to think about working in pairs. Okay, to find somebody that you can work with. It doesn't have to be somebody that you know, but just find somebody who looks friendly. I smile a lot in here. And to ask your partner, and then to swap over. So you take your turns at this. Tell me about a perfect life for you, what it would look like. And you are allowed to go beyond the limits of possibility. In fact, you're positively encouraged to go beyond the limits of possibility. You don't have to consider anybody else. You don't have to think about anybody else's needs. If your life was absolutely spot on perfect, what would it have in it? Ask the person, ask them to clarify, record what they're saying, map it out, draw it out. Use flip chart paper, big graphics, colours, pens if you can, rather than just writing things down. So you really map out a perfect world for your partner, and then swap over. The trick is to try and dig underneath a little bit, ask questions that probe a little bit, map out that world, what it looks like. Okay? I want you to spend a bit of time on this, because this is probably the hardest thing out of person set planning that people find difficulty with. So, and I'm here, ask me if you get stuck with it. Right? We're going to have a conversation about perfect life. And it doesn't include football, right? Just like get that
No, sorry.
things that are going to be important to put into the rest of the pack. It gives us the kind of focus, if you like. We were just having a little conversation, side conversation there around, and that will be different for everybody. Each person will have a different kind of a focus. I could ask you to dream now about, a life in Bromley in 10 years' time that was perfect. Absolutely perfect life in Bromley, where everybody, every citizen of Bromley lived a fantastic life. And we could post it up, and we could actually look at all of the things in it that kind of give an indication as to things that you, in Bromley, and people with mental health issues, felt were important things. Because it will tell a story, it will focus in on that. Or we can focus in on each individual, like you've just done for yourselves. You've identified things around your dreams in life. If you had a lottery win tomorrow, millions of pounds, what would you do with it? What would you be your dream life? How would you spend that money? How would it help to change your kind of days? So the North Star is the information gathering place. All right? And it is tough to help people dream, especially people who've not been used to dreaming, or people who don't feel entitled to dream, or people who find it difficult because they're so stuck with things about their life day to day that they almost feel like they're not able to lift themselves out and look at a blue sky scenario. So it's something that takes a particular kind of skill, and you need to be quite careful, because again we'll go back to that idea that we are not suggesting that dreams are going to be elicited from people just to say, well, we can or we can't achieve that dream for you, because we don't achieve people's dreams, we don't do it for them. What we will be doing in the path is helping people to walk some steps that take them closer to the things that are in that dream, but things that are positive and possible to be achieved. So it gives the kind of purpose, it gives a place to be headed towards. The next part of the path process asks us to then find a way of pulling out of the dream important things that people do want to focus on, that are positive and are possible. And the timescale that gets put on that can be anything that the person wants or the people want. Often it's a year, because that gives people a manageable time frame. So kind of backward planning tool. As you can see, we started out on this side of the tool, and we will then work back into the positive possible 1 year, 2 year goals. When people are facilitating path, they often do this by using great big wall charts and having the arrow marked out on the wall chart, and then the information gets recorded as the group of people and the person are deciding what gets put onto the dream path and then onto the positive goals. So what you've just done would have got, if we were facilitating your path, would have got mapped out on this side of the wall chart. Okay, we've got recorded. And people do that in different ways. Depends on how people want things recorded, but often, people use some graphics, keywords, buzzwords, things that people will recognise. The only people who need to recognise it are the people who are doing the work. It doesn't need to be recognised by anybody else outside of that path event. Okay, so as long as it makes sense to the people as a record of what's being said, that's fine. And dreaming is also quite difficult for people who have quite impoverished lifestyles at the point in time that they're at. That doesn't really matter too much, because it gives an indication, still tells us what's important, we can still discover information. But it's great to help people to really sit outside of the boxes and go through the wild dream, because you can get some really good answers, and it's good stuff. And it makes people feel light-hearted about it, because it doesn't have to be dead serious, any of this either. This is about people just taking time to have the conversations to explore. Okay, so you had a little go yourselves. Anything you want to say about that? It is the hardest part of the futures-based planning tools, to do that dreaming bit, because people find it hard to ask people to have dreams. And it's also, having dreams doesn't necessarily mean that people expect to achieve them. I don't know about you, but my dreams are always the ones that I have while I'm driving the car, because I'm bored and I need to get from one place to another, and it's a little bit of drag and it's traffic or whatever. And I sit in the car and I find that I've got from one end of Bristol to another, and all the way across town. I don't know what I've done. I've been driving, but I haven't got a clue, because all the time I've been plotting and scheming what I would do with that £1 million if I win it. It's going to be a real tough one, because I don't actually do the lottery, but there you go. But you know that it's there, isn't it? We do plot and scheme and think, oh gosh, if only I could do that, and I would, or if I could just escape from it, I would love to be able to retire early, all that sort of stuff. And you put yourself into a place that's really not the place you're at the moment. So we do it naturally. But for some people, they don't necessarily find it easy to express what would be in that big blue sky scenario dream, which you probably had little bits of difficulty with just as you were doing your own dream just then. How did you get on with it? You're laughing. Some good stuff? Yeah. Don't tell me the good bits, but any kind of indication of stuff that you didn't know about yourself, or?
Do you mean the bits without
Yeah, not the bits we talked about. All right, that's right. Okay. So the dream is for more withdrawal people. Yeah. Okay. And highest mountains coming in there in Switzerland with a log cabin. Mine's a desert island, but I have to have the sun. Yeah, I have to be warm.
It's not in Switzerland.
Yeah, no, I don't have to have a desert island in the Caribbean or something. And George Clooney comes into my dream an awful lot, but I tell everybody about that in the hope that somebody might know him somewhere and just put him my way again. But he's definitely there in my dream. So it is quite a difficult thing to do. Do other people find anything interesting, or do they find it difficult?
I found it easy because I'm sort of don't really know it, so I felt comfortable talking to you about my dream.
Yes.
Whereas if I mentioned it about the group, I can't mention it in a group.
Absolutely, that's fine. Yeah. It's done how the person wants it to be done. It doesn't have any set format. There is no right, no wrong in person-centered planning. It's about questions and conversations. Okay, so what I would like you to do is to go back into your partnership and take a walk, okay? Take a walk through a year. Imagine yourselves to be in 2005. It's the 24th of June 2005, and you're meeting up with your person again. You met last year, 2004, and you talked about dreams. You had that dream, okay? A year has passed since that person talked to you about dreams, and you started to gain an understanding of what's important to the person. Look back and say things that have happened that relate to the dream that you could see are possible to have happened. Okay? So they relate to the dream and you can see that they could have happened in that year. So you take a walk to 2005, look back and say, all right, that and that happened. And they were things that could have happened, which have some relationship to the dream. They bear some relation. Just a few things that happened. But do it from the point of view that you're looking back and seeing that they happened. You picture that it did definitely take place and write it down as though it has happened. Okay, having thought about what's positive and possible, the next step of the path takes the person and or the group that's being facilitated to the beginning point. Okay, so having looked at the vision, having drawn some positive and possible goals that could be things that happen in a given time frame, the people then focus in on, so what does now look like? Okay? And that's what I want you to go back and do, is to just very, very quickly say, and the now looks like this. This is what life is like now. Alright, just identify some of the key features, good, bad, indifferent, some of the key features of life now. Okay, we'll take a good 5 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back for a discussion before coffee. So you're just looking at how is life now? That's the question. How does it feel? What's happening? That's what the now, today, 2004 is like. You have set up a tension between now and in a year's time. And these sections in between are all about planning as to how to start moving to those 1 year goals and targets. And it breaks things down so that there's manageable blocks. We have the first couple of sections are who else needs to be involved, who else could help. And that may be a few people's names, or it may be a whole host of people or potential people. They don't have to be people who are asked permission to be put up there. They're just suggestions. So somebody's saying things, something like, I don't know, in a year's time I want to have lost a stone and be fit. Okay? In the enroll section, we might think about the local sports and leisure people, or we might think about the GP, or we might think about... There's all sorts of suggestions as to people that potentially could help with that view. Who could be brought on board is in the enroll section. Keeping strong and staying strong is the next bit, because that's about, so what's it going to take? Because what we all know, we're all very aware of, is that we can make lovely plans, can't we? And then we can do anything about them. Because for some reason or other, it's really difficult to keep going. So what's going to help people get strong and stay strong? What's it going to take? If it's a group of people, it might be about regular communication, it might be about regular meetings, it might be about having fun along the way. And bearing that in mind into the next bit, which is the very clear action steps. And the beauty about PATH is that people get to have their names put up when it's their responsibility, or when they volunteer responsibility. So there's no escaping it. Okay? It's great, isn't it? Because we can make loads of plans and we say, oh yeah, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and then nothing gets put about who's going to take responsibility for those things. And so you meet again in a few weeks' time and nothing's happened because nobody had time, nobody took responsibility, nobody felt obliged, nobody felt like it was important because there hadn't been any assigning of people's responsibility, and so nothing happened. So in PATH, that's really important, and it's really important to share as well that people who are there, who are signing up to helping and supporting those action steps, want to be there. And part of a facilitator's role is to make sure that that's, so it's very gently and sensitively ensure that that's really what is happening, that people aren't there because they feel obliged, but because they want to help the person move towards those one-year target things. Okay, so all you're doing with PATH, planning alternative tomorrows with hope, is setting up a way of action planning, but action planning on what's important to the person, what makes sense and is meaningful to the person. That's why that early work on the vision and the 1 year or the whatever targets is really important, because that sets the scene of what's important to the person. And the questioning and discussion that goes on is about checking that out, we've really got to grips with support that is going to support the person in what they want and how they want to be supported, in what makes sense for them. That's about as best as we're going to get in terms of hitting the mark with what makes sense for each individual. It is difficult because there's always going to be things that we can look at and think, well, maybe that wasn't the person for you, maybe we're not right. But I challenge you to tell me about a time when something was decided for somebody where we didn't have that as an issue anyway. When did we ever really make plans with people that were based on, knowing that was actually truly right? This is about the best chance we're going to get is by doing this kind of planning with people and having these kinds of conversations with people. And sometimes there will be things that are quite tough to deal with. And that's tough. It will be tough. It will be about tackling things that are really important to people that we find quite difficult to know how to support well. But at least we're actually acknowledging it and listening carefully. And at least we're saying, yeah, I hear that. That is, it's a point at which we're actually saying we all hear and understand about this level of importance. Finding a way through that is going to be difficult, but we can do that together because at least we know what we're tackling all together. So PATH, great for real getting heads together and really thinking hard, but it can't just be something that sits in on a desk or is on a wall and nobody pays any attention to. We have to keep finding ways to be renegotiating the goals. And if you look at the PATH process, you'll see that it's got things called first steps and action plan, or next steps as sometimes they're called. And those get reviewed. It's not just something that we say at the beginning of the year, right, well, we're all going to work on this and then we'll meet again in 2005. Those middle chunks of first steps action plans towards 1 year goals, those middle chunks get reviewed on a regular basis. However regular, it makes sense to do that. Okay, so very clear action planning that holds you to task with the PATH planning process. I'm just going to nip back before we have a break to the personal futures planning. This was one of the early tools that was designed by a woman called Beth Mount, and she has produced some really good resources that help us to ask questions about helping people to gain a sense of what is important and what we can help with. I've got a book list resources list with me, so I can give that to Haley and to photocopy people if they want it. But Beth Mount's stuff is really helpful because she's got some really good activities that people can do. It's just questions that people can do themselves, or they can explore themselves, or they can do as a group. Loads of stuff around thinking about what does happen for you at the moment in terms of relationships. What about your community? Where are you? What places do you go? Are they places that you value being at? Are they places where you are valued? What's the quality of the interactions that take place? So lots of things around that, and also then with the future spaces again, is that how you want it to be, or could it be different? Is there a different kind of a future? Is it that you want to be in paid work because that will make a difference rather than volunteering? Is it that you want to be in paid work because you don't want to be a benefits claimant? All sorts of different things that have different impacts on people and different reasons for change for people. So that's in your packs as well. After the break, we're going to move on just briefly to look at essential lifestyle planning, which I know some people have had contact with. And if you want to in the break, just have a look at planning for yourself document on that back table. That will give you an indication of how essential lifestyle planning does have a slightly different tack to it. I'm going to look at that after the break and then look at what are the implications for you, how you want to go about this, do you want to take it on in the future, that sort of stuff. Okay, what an hour? Yeah, a bit cheeky with that video now, aren't you?
I got that. I'll edit her out later.
Sorry, John.
What? Okay, essential lifestyle planning. Business and planning tools that are on offer. Essential lifestyle planning, however, has a slightly different focus, and it also has a slightly different aspect to it in that it's very much more detailed in the questions it asks. It's a lot more paperwork. And the people that went on a microphone 2 days, you will know about that. You will understand that, because that big file over there is a whole load of work and exercises that people can do to try and develop an understanding of themselves in terms of what, basically the question is, what makes a good day every day? How can you have a good day every day? What would be the essential elements and the important things to make sure we're attending to? What things definitely need support and what things we need to leave alone and not be interfering with, in order for us to help you walk towards a lifestyle that makes best sense for you and helps you to have a good day every day, a comfortable day every day. And for people who are experiencing a level of discomfort in their lives, it's actually a really good practical planning tool. In the planning facilitation, for the person can either do it themselves, or it can be done as a facilitation by somebody else who helps the person do the thinking. There's all sorts of different ways to ask the questions that ask about, let's discover together what are the things that you absolutely need. What are the things that are really very important to you? What makes you tick on a day-to-day basis? Okay, there's lots of different exercises that the Essential Lifestyle Planning tool helps people to walk through, and then gathers the information into a plan that says, in order to have a good day every day, these things need to happen, and these are where support factors need to be built in. And there's some stuff in there as well that's about helping people stay safe and healthy. So it's a very detailed planning style. It focuses on the individual's life now, and how that can be improved and maintained. It's a very in the now context of helping people's lives be good on a daily basis. It looks at what is important to the person, what support the person requires to have the important things present or absent. Because bearing in mind, and that's reminiscent to the MAPS tool, that there are some things that people have in life that actually are very, very distressing or uncomfortable, and are a bit like the nightmare. What we should be walking away and supporting people to not have can be just as important as what we're supporting people to have. The Essential Lifestyle Planning also includes a section on communication and looks at people's preferred communication styles and ways of operating in interactions. What's important to the person to have in interactions. And so some of the things that can get looked at there are, what are you telling us with your non-verbal behaviour? What are you telling us when you do that thing? Let's unpick it a bit. It's a very useful little tool, that. It's one that I sometimes use, not as a kind of planned out thing, but I might have said, look, you know, when I do this, actually what I'm really saying, the subtext here is, I'm saying you're ignoring me, or I'm saying that you're not paying enough attention, or I'm saying that actually a bunch of flowers would make a whole lot of difference, you know. Oh, well, I didn't know that. Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, why can't you just say that? Because that's not the way I am. I like to throw little hints out, and then I get very frustrated when the little hints don't result in action. So you can see how this communication thinking can actually help people who find it very difficult to say things in ways that people easily understand. And it helps people to fathom out what behaviours and non-verbal stuff is implying or is expressing. So that's a very useful little part of the essential lifestyle planning. And again, it's, you know, people arrive at understanding communication by doing different exercises, by thinking about the ways that people are in daily life, what things seem to work well and what things don't work well. It's a way of beginning to get to know a person and to build a team around them that understands that stuff and can respond to it in support practices that respond to what's been heard. And it's a good basis for individual service design. So people who are in the process of having individual supports being designed and being developed. Essential lifestyle planning is a really good day-to-day tool. In a very practical sense, what I would like you to do now is just a very short exercise so that you get a feel of something, some of the exercises that might take place within essential lifestyle planning. One of the ones that is used on a regular basis is what's called the early morning routine. What I'd like you to do is to just for yourself, find a piece of paper or a piece of flip-chart paper and just write down your early morning routine on a weekday. Okay? Now, you do not need to put in anything that we do not want to hear. Thank you. Not that we're all going to inspect your early morning routines, but a partner might. So don't write anything that you're not happy to share. Just write down your early morning routine. Now, the joy of this one is that the more detail you write, the easier it is to do the exercise. So be as detailed as you can. You know, when you get up in the morning, do you have that cup of tea first? Are you going to have to make the tea first, or is it important to do something else first, like have the bath first? What is the general routine? The other way that this can be very helpful is that it helps us to identify that we have different routines. We are no two people alike, and that includes the things that are comfortable for us to do on a routine basis. But don't share anything you do not want to hear. You know, if that snooze button gets hit 2 times, say it gets hit 2 times. That's what you like to do. You like to have it on the snooze. You yawn. That's that early morning stuff, isn't it? We have a sentence in the back. Okay. Having written down your early morning routine, just find a person next to you, and this is going to be the only person you share with, and swap over. Sit and have a look at the other person's routine. And just have a think about if you were going to have to do that routine every morning, how would you feel? Is to continue to have a conversation with the person whose routine you've sat in front and who you've now by now realised that you can possibly do what they do in the morning, unless you're very, very like-minded. Usually everybody's routine has something in it that is very, very personal to them. What I want you to do is to try and spot what it is that makes it a very individual routine and try and find out from the person how important those things are. You know, like the roll up in the morning. Is that really essential to have? Is that the first cup of coffee really essential to have? What would happen if you didn't have that thing after the first thing in the morning? Would it be a bad day from then on in? Find out what are the key things in that early morning routine that are very significant, very important to the person to have a good day. So you're going to be asking your partner to explain. Have a good day every day. You're also looking at discovering what's important to somebody as opposed to what other people may think is important for somebody. So there's a distinction. And in all of the questions that get asked through ELP, Essential Lifestyle Planning, which, as you can see, there's a huge amount of stuff to be worked through, which leads to support plan information, daily support plan information. What basically is being asked is what is making sense and working right now, and what is not making sense, is not working, what's the downside, what's not working right now. And we do that from two different perspectives. Okay? This essential lifestyle planning is the planning tool that really does help people to understand around what it takes to keep people healthy and safe, what kind of support is implied to help people stay healthy and safe, and to have negotiation around that. At the same time, as also recognising that there has to be a balance with what's important to somebody. We cannot keep somebody in a way of living a lifestyle. We cannot support them to have a lifestyle that's totally about what works for other people because of health and safety issues. If we're not prepared to balance that with, we also need to recognise and balance it with what's important to somebody. And the finding out about what's important to somebody is done through those conversations. It's done through the what's your early morning routine. Talk about what a good Saturday would look like. Talk about what an evening routine would look like. What works for you, what doesn't work for you is kind of like the main themes of questioning. And that gets then recorded into a balanced thing in terms of, so where is there disagreement and what needs to be renegotiated and the support needs to be reworked on. The other really valuable thing out of essential lifestyle planning is that it also identifies when people don't need support. Now, my own experience of essential lifestyle planning has been to use it with people that have had high levels of support, and in fact actually have become over-supported by the kinds of lifestyles they're leading. So they may be in residential provision or continuous care situations. And essential lifestyle planning works out actually there's quite an awful lot in the person's day-to-day life that they don't really need somebody to be doing something in it. So it gets left out of the support plan. We don't identify where people don't need support because it's not conditioned for support. So the whole plan is based only on what makes sense for somebody to have support, either because it's important to them or it's important for them. And that's been a negotiated process through all of the information. And I know that Fabian, you've had some experience of people who've gone ahead and tried and used persons essential lifestyle planning for themselves, and that's the report back is that they found it extremely useful and they've done it for themselves.
Two people who did the training here in November. One went away straight away, and I think within days produced his own plan. And that's actually mentioned in the Social Exclusion Unit's report, which is extraordinary, because they were so taken with his enthusiasm about it. And Dawn tells me of another person who took this up and has spent months working it out for himself. In fact, you should say Dawn rather than me. But has produced a very detailed plan for himself. But he's done it in his own way, and it's taken a great deal of time and effort. It's been incredibly well researched. I'd love to see them, but I mean, they belong to the people.
Yes.
But it is marvellous that 2 out of, I think we had about 6 or 8 people who are using services went on that course with their support workers. So straight away, people have gone and done it, which is absolutely fantastic.
And again, we would be saying that this is very much a case of offering people a way of exploring and discovering information together to just work out what does make sense. It's not essential lifestyle planning probably runs the biggest risk of becoming a service-based tool because it has all of that printed information and stuff to wade through. And actually, an awful lot of people would say that there's too much paperwork. And it doesn't need to be that amount of paperwork. You don't need to have somebody work their way through all of that. As somebody who's supporting a person, you could quite happily go ahead and facilitate essential lifestyle planning without any of that. You could just be asking questions of the person, or maybe the people that know them and support them, around what is the early morning routine? What does the person find useful? What kind of things do they seem to find more pleasurable? What sort of things do they tend to avoid? What's essential? And that, in fact, actually, that's what when I've been facilitating for the people I was talking about earlier, that's exactly how I've done it. I've not had, there would have been no point. I've done it out of familiarity with person-centred planning tool that is essential lifestyle planning, to ask questions that find out information that's going to be important, given the situations that those people are living in. And given the fact that they do live in quite restricted environments and have done for a long length of time, again, that implied more around essential lifestyle planning, because we want people to be having a good day every day, but also building in an idea that there is a futures perspective. But that's real tough when people have had such restricted lifestyles and have had, got issues around health and safety. So a good starting point are questions that are asked in terms of essential lifestyle planning, but it doesn't stop. The plan is not the outcome. Big message out of this: the plan is not the outcome. The plan is the start. Because what happens once we've discovered that information is the important stuff. Okay, so I'm giving you a basic run-through of the tools that are available. There's lots of backup information for all of this. I mean, for the path planning tool, there's a workbook. It's absolutely essential if you are going to try facilitating the path. Maps and path, there's a combined workbook called All My Life's a Circle, I think that's what that one's called. If you come across the concept of circles of support, anything that refers to the idea of informal networks being support and social strength for people, all of those will have person-centred planning tools embodied in the text of circles of support information. If you come across anything that's to do with an organisation called Communitas, around Connecticut in the States, that will also include lots of ways to help people think through what's important in life and what kind of valued futures they want to walk towards. So that leaves us with about another half an hour to think about what's this mean for you. Okay, we're looking at how the planning then gets met with person-centred responses, because that's the crucial bit, isn't it? There's absolutely no point in listening real carefully to anybody if we're not prepared to then look at how we meet what we hear with person-centred responses and support responses. And I know that all of you, and this is not a comment on anybody here, but it is a comment on what the challenges that may be faced in that shifting situation, in that shifting response scenario. And that's going to be a shift in values and attitudes across the board. And we're thinking about one of the key values of person-centred planning, one of the key concepts in there is that we help people to have lifestyles that include them being community citizens, participants, people where people want to be, where it makes sense for people to be using all the same sorts of services and supports and groups and organisations and local social networks to be able to go directly, to that and help people to be a part of that, to access it in quite the same way as anybody else does, not in a separate way, because that's what those things exist in community for all citizens to access, and no group of people should be seen as any different. It's fair to say that there are some things that could get in the way, and certainly probably will get in the way. And they're just things that we need to bear in mind when thinking about what does this mean on a local level in thinking about the introduction of person-centred planning, person-centred approaches. Bearing in mind that person-centred approaches don't sit alone, they are part and parcel of all the kind of the shifts and the things that are happening for you in particular, because you do have a whole local context that takes into account recovery-based approaches, social inclusion, the growing concept of direct payments so that people can actually have choice and make their own selections around the supports that they have, so they can actually go by and decide themselves what it is, as the customer, as the, no, I'll tell you how you're going to deliver it, because I've already paid you to do that. So you've got a whole growing range of things that actually just a part, which person-centred approaches, person-centred planning are part of, an essential ingredient to, because the first port of call is the listening carefully and knowing and understanding what it is that's going to make sense, what's going to be useful to people. So person-centredness involves change, undoubtedly, and you've already got a path that's looking at change processes. There's commitment, there needs to be commitment to supporting, developing and responding positively to that change. And that is a whole context, isn't it? Because influential people can sometimes get in the way and need to be on side with understanding what it is that people are asking for, demanding, in fact. Some people can find change threatening. Some individuals can have had an experience that really does mean that they don't trust. And who comes along and says, you know, well, trust me, we can do this, we can do this, we can person set up planning, we've got all these other things, recovery, social inclusion, direct payments, it's going to be great, trust me. Some people can find that very difficult and actually might find that intolerable because of their own experiences of being let down. Perhaps there's been some disrespect, being treated unfairly. We need to, again, to know each individual and what's going to make a good approach or a way of doing that well, or not at all if they're telling us they're feeling to not be doing that. Support staff can feel unsupported or that their talents are not recognised, and again, that's a growing thing, isn't it, that people do work together and recognise and value each other. There can be unrealistic expectations about time. We need to think about the language that we're using and the change in culture. And for some people, actually, this can all seem a little bit too simple and obvious to the point that they actually become inactive. And that can be a problem. Because people, what are we doing that? My challenge to you would be to say, give it a go. On yourselves first, feel what it feels like. Have somebody that you trust do some of this stuff with you, so you know what it feels like to actually have those questions asked, how threatening sometimes it could be, how intrusive it could be if done the wrong way, what kind of levels of sensitivity need to be applied, and also to experience how different it can be for people. And then start, to try it out with people and just get a feel of what a difference it can make. It can seem too simple. Because it isn't anything complicated, because it isn't rocket science, it is very simple. But we have to be kind of committed and enthusiastic and prepared to deal with stuff that perhaps we've not been able to listen to carefully enough in the past. Yes.
For example, if you're unsupported or that the talents not recognised.
Could, possibly.
Why do you think that would be?
I think probably because the experience to date, and it's a pitfall really, it's something to be aware of, is that person-centred planning can almost become something that is handed to people in direct support relationships. Right, that's your bag, go do that. And I think the important lesson from all of the stuff that's happened, and I know I keep going back to learning disability field, but that's where we learn our lessons. The important thing for people to keep a wary eye on is that by handing it into the service arena, it becomes a service tool. And if we then hand it to people in direct support relationships, it's almost like we're saying, so you've got to learn what's important to people, you've got to then go and do it, and hear it, and then go and do it. And what people hear is something that perhaps isn't, something that they need support, and they need to be valued for the advocacy that means that they will be doing, because they will be representing people through the person-centred planning. Yeah? So I think there's almost a tale to be told there around a little bit more caution around who this actually really does belong to, and a very clear concept that any person-centred planning only can belong to the person themselves. It does not belong to anybody else, and the whole process does not belong to service or direct support staff, but they can be valued for their knowledge and understanding of people as part of that process. Sometimes that doesn't always happen so well.
Can I say something about...
Yes, of course, yeah.
I'll come up and say...
I'll stand behind it and have a look at what you look like.
On the screen there. This is absolutely crucial, this point about who this belongs to and who does this kind of work and who supports that kind of work. Those of us who've been working on this in Bromley now for quite some time are pretty clear in our minds that we don't want to foist this on people. We don't want to make this another burden on community mental health teams, for example. What we've committed ourselves to with our pilot projects is that we want to enable staff to become familiar with this way of working, to be positive and responsive towards it. But we want to give the knowledge and experience and understanding of this to people who use the service who'd like to get involved with it. And we want to put money behind that. Rather than appointing a worker to take this forwards, what we would like to do is to work in groups of service users and staff to extend our knowledge and understanding of these different ways of working together. But mostly for people who are using the service to develop these skills, because it's not for me. It could be, but that would be in my private life. It's not for me as a professional. But I think it is for me as a professional to have some of these values and to understand what this is about and to be able to respond very positively towards it and to provide support to people who are engaging in this. And, if I want to do some of this by way of facilitation, but not as an injunction. Staff have already got CPA. You know, that's tough enough to get that off the ground. They also have all the clinical activities that hopefully will be provided to help people with their distress. I think we would like them to be in a position to be able to focus on that. And then the non-statutory sector, the employment sector, the housing sector, and all the community organisations in Bromley can put some effort into this stuff, because this is about the whole life, rather than just about ameliorating distress. Does that make sense? I have no idea whether people agree with that. We're going to have to go through a period of meeting with people and checking that out. And we've only just started really doing that. But David, if I could ask you, and we brought some of this to your locality managers meeting. What does that position sound like? Is that putting you two on the spot?
Well, yeah, but that doesn't sound in any way threatening at all. I mean, it's common sense. There's a lot to think about common sense. It should be something that essentially that we plan about service users like themselves, or we know that that's the huge example that there was that people that hear voices taken groups running themselves and roll out a program. There's no reason why professionals should get involved.
For those of you not aware, the recovery groups that have been run so far in Bromley have all been designed by service users and staff together. They've actually been run by staff so far. The intention is that people who've been through the groups, who wish to and have an interest, can train in group skills so that they can also be facilitators. So it can be a two-way street to level out some of the power differences that sometimes get in the way of these kinds of things. But we're going to try it in 3 areas. I mean, Mel, yours is one of the areas.
Yeah.
Mel works in the rehab support team.
And we're the Oxleys
Yes.
pilots, aren't we? And I think it is interesting what you say. I think there's probably something that's going to be debated, over time, where health services staff need to be in relation to this. I know my view is probably it will depend on the individual as to who they want and how able they are to use other resources and how much feel they can be directly involved in it. I think probably for some rehab clients we might need to at least get things started. Interesting to see.
One other idea that's been put out is that we've got 3 different organisations involved in the pilots. We've got the rehab support team in Oxford, we've got mine, we've got Community Options. But any service user could, if you like, approach any of those 3 organisations and say, I'd like you to help me with developing my planning. Preferably the one they're least involved with in some kind of a way, to get out of a potential trap. But I think you point out a number of times, Paula, the plan can become service-oriented. But if the member of staff doing the helping isn't part of that person's service, they're much less likely to do that. So I think we're almost saying to people, there's a bit of professional voluntary work you could do in and around the service. If you like this stuff, if you feel it's a nice thing to do, you don't have to do it where you do your main job. If you and your manager can negotiate an hour or 2 here and there, go off and do something in mine's premises or mine come to you, I think we could probably facilitate that. And in time, I would hope the same thing would happen, that those service users who really get into this, and now I pick on you, Frank, and you're already doing bits of this in your personal development classes in the colleges. But there would be people who would want to take this up, who would become a community of knowledge about this work locally. And then it's outside, well, it's not exactly outside of the power struggles that we live with every day, but at least it's a bit more even. And people can make a choice. I'd like a friend to help.